Well, good morning, everyone. Muy buenos días a todos. My name is Kyle Gomez-Leineweber. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy here at GALEO and the GALEO Impact Fund. We are going to present today some of the findings and data for our 2024 Georgia Latino Voter Report to basically talk about the electoral landscape that Latinos are living in here in Georgia and what our impact was in 2024. And, obviously, the kind of key takeaway that, we want everyone to leave here with is that Latinos in Georgia continue to increase in representation and strength. I will be primarily giving the presentation. Our CEO and founder, Jerry Gonzalez, he's also here, and he'll be providing important context as needed throughout the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, how were Latino voters identified here in Georgia? We worked with one of our, longtime national partners, NALEO, to help us go through the data that we got from the Secretary of State's office, to identify those Latino voters. And basically what NALEO does, is they use a surname, matching, basically, based off identifying Latino voters primarily based off of the last names that they have, as well as in combination with voters who self-identify as Latino. There are limitations to this methodology. Part of it being historically, one, it's a lot of people fall through the cracks because when reporting or self-identifying, self-reporting their race, they don't, you know, sometimes a lot of people in our community only identify as one race, whether that be white, black, or Hispanic. Not everyone provides a response as to what their race or ethnicity is when they register to vote. And so there are a number of reasons why there are probably still more Latino voters in the state that we're just not aware of or do not know to be Latino. Uh, However, we are thankful to NALEO for helping us identify those Latino voters.
The,
Um,
Kyle,
yeah,
the
go ahead,
one
Jerry.
thing the one thing I will add is NALEO does this identification, and this is considered a best practice nationally, and this is how Latino voters are identified across the country. So this is the best practice standard form of identifying Latino voters across the country. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Jerry. And so, without further ado, we'll start digging into the data. And so what we found is that currently in the state of Georgia, there are approximately 498,298 registered Latino voters in the state of Georgia. So that's nearly 500,000 Latino voters in the state of Georgia. And when you compare that to 2020, that's more than 113,000 new Latino voters registered to vote in the state of Georgia, which is a significant growth, nearly 30% growth rate in the state of Georgia since 2020 for Latino voters. And then when it comes to turnout, there were more than 262,000 Latinos in Georgia who voted in the 2024 election cycle. And that's relatively in line as far as turnout percentage. We still we have about just over 4% of the share of the votes that were cast in the state of Georgia. But that is, still with the growth that we saw in registrants, that's more Latinos who voted in this election as well as Latinos who were registered to vote in 2024. And so what does the breakdown of that look like? Excuse me. As you can see, there is, a bulk, a majority of registered Latino voters in the state of Georgia are under the age of 40. So our electorate here in Georgia is relatively young. However, when you look at Latinos who voted, and this is very much in line with other demographics as well. The older our electorate gets, the more likely they are to vote. And as you can see, from the ages of 18 to just under 40, you have a turnout percentage of about 45%. And then when you jump over to our senior Latinos, 61 and up, you see a turnout percentage of almost 65%. Um, and so that shows that we have really across the board, relatively engaged Latino electorate among those who are registered. But certainly with our senior Latinos, they are voting in high numbers.
The one thing I'd add in that
Mhm.
chart, Kyle, is that it's about 60% of the Latino electorate in Georgia is under the age of 40. But they also, when taken as a whole under the age of 40, represent 51% of the total number of voters that turned out as well. So even though there is a higher percentage of voter turnout in the over 40 age groups, the voter turnout in the under 40 is really significant and needs to be recognized. And that's why we spend a lot of our time and effort working to make sure that those under 40 are turning out to vote in most of our work in our community.
And then when we go over to the gender breakdown, we have more Latinas, more female Latinas registered to vote than Latinos. As you can see, there's several thousand more women Latinas registered to vote in Georgia than men. And then when you actually look at turnout, the turnout is higher among Latinas than Latino men. Uh, Whereas in 2024, we actually saw a slight dip in the number, excuse me, not the number, but the percentage of registered Latino men voting. Uh, the percentage of Latina women voting in the state of Georgia is basically the same. Here we see it was 57%, and in 2020, for female voters, it was also 57%. So Latinas certainly in the state of Georgia are leading the way when it comes to civic engagement and participation in our elections. While Latino men, again, we did see a slight dip in 2020. Latino men still are coming out and voting in strong numbers. And as you can see across the board, looking, kind of zooming out and just looking generally, one thing you'll notice is that the number of Latinos who are registered to vote has increased significantly, whether we're talking about men, women, or even younger voters. And that just speaks to the important work that GALEO is doing, as well as a number of our statewide partners and national partners are doing to register Latino voters in the state of Georgia. Now we're going to move over to the top 10 counties in the state of Georgia for the actual size of the Latino electorate. Anyone who is paying, I should mention, this is not our first Latino voter report. We've done this for several presidential election cycles now. And when you look at the counties that were in the top 10 last cycle, they're essentially the same counties that we're seeing this cycle. There was a switch, and I'll mention that in some of the actual rankings, if you will. But in general, the order is generally the same, and these counties are going to be familiar to a lot of people who've been keeping up with the Latino vote in the state of Georgia. So coming in first is Gwinnett County. Gwinnett County is Georgia's second most populous county in the state of Georgia. And so it's not a huge surprise that Gwinnett County continues to have the largest Latino electorate in the state of Georgia. There are just over 87,000 Latinos registered in Gwinnett County. of those voters, 55, almost 56%, I should say, voted in the 2024 election cycle. So that's almost 49,000 Latinos who voted in Gwinnett County during the 2024 election cycle. And you'll see in this bar graph, yeah, if you actually look at the percentage, the rate of turnout, there was a, minuscule dip in the rate of turnout, but with the growth of registered Latino voters in Gwinnett County, even though that we saw a slight dip in the percentage turnout, there were more Latinos who voted in Gwinnett County this cycle than last cycle. And you're going to see that trend remain to be true in basically all of these counties that we're going to look at. And so I think, what these numbers show is that Latinos in Gwinnett County continuing to expand their influence in that county. And as a result, with it being the second most populous state and one of the fastest growing counties in the state, Latinos are expanding their influence across the state as well. I'd also note that Latino voters comprise just over about 13% of Gwinnett County's electorate. That's an increase of about 1 percentage point excuse me, 1 percentage point since 2020. So that's what we have for Gwinnett County. Obviously, the election results show that Gwinnett County has continued to kind of compound its status as a stronghold for Democratic candidates, with Kamala Harris winning about 60, almost 70,000 votes in the winning 70,000 more votes than Donald Trump in the most recent election cycle.
So if you could go back to
Yeah,
Gwinnett,
absolutely.
so in that regard, just for context, normally the national Latino voter participation rate across the country, it hovers slightly below 50%. So the fact that here in Georgia, the Latino electorate is performing way above the national Latino voter participation rates, this is another thing to note in many of these counties. So usually it hovers around 48, 47%. We're not sure what the 2024 data is yet, but just for context, nationally, in the last election cycle, it had dipped to 47%. So if you compare that to what we're seeing now, is Latinos in Georgia are outperforming national Latino voter participation numbers.
Absolutely. And as Jerry said, you're going to continue seeing that as we go through these counties. I want to hover over Cobb County as well. Cobb continues to grow as a kind of hub for Latino voter participation in Georgia. It's the second in the state for the number of Latino voters in our state. Cobb reported having about just under 51,000 registered Latino voters in 2024. That's pretty significant when you consider that in 2020, there were almost 41,000 reported Latino voters in 2020. So that's a pretty significant increase. About almost just under 30,000 Latino voters in Cobb cast their ballots in 2024. And so we saw a turnout rate of about 57%. Again, you'll see that we saw a slight dip in the turnout percentage, but with the increase in actual Latinos registered to vote in Cobb County, more Latinos voted in Cobb County than in the last election cycle. So as of right now, according to our data, Latino voters accounted for about 8.5% of registered voters in Cobb County, an increase from 7.8% in 2020. So this kind of highlights the growing impact of Latino voters, particularly in the Metro Atlanta area, on the political landscape in that area. So then we're going to move on a little bit more quickly. As you can see, Fulton County is a key county for Latino voter activity in Georgia, ranking third in the state for Latino concentration. In 2024, there were about 41,000 registered Latino voters in Fulton, which is an increase from just under 34,000 in 2020. Of these registered voters, of these 41,000 registered voters in Fulton, about 23,000 cast their ballots in 2024, which is a turnout rate of just under 57%. And then in DeKalb, another important high, major population center in the state, Metro Atlanta County in the state. We continue to see steady growth in its population of Latino voters, with the number of registered Latino voters increasing to about just under 28,000 in 2024, up from 22,000 in 2020, with a turnout rate of 55.22%, slightly lower than that 57.42% that we saw in 2024. As of right now, Latino voters account for just under 5% of DeKalb County's electorate, compared to just under 4% in 2020. Now we're going to meditate, if you will, or we're going to stick to Hall County for a little bit because it's an important county. Because in 2024, Hall County saw a significant growth of its Latino electorate. And this is no small part because of the work that organizations like GALEO continue to do in Hall County. Has long been one of our target counties because of the unique and significant Latino population that lives in Hall County. So in 2020, we saw that there were about 18,000 Latino registered voters in Hall County. Right now, according to our data, there's just under 25,000 registered Latino voters. Latino voter turnout in Hall County reached 11,560 voters, which is a turnout rate of about 47%, which is actually, unlike some of the other counties we've looked at, this is actually an improvement from 2020 by almost, by more than a percentage point. Latino voters in Hall, according to the data that we have, comprise almost 16% of Hall County's registered voters. This marks continued growth in Latinos' share of the electorate in Hall County. In the 2024 presidential election cycle, Hall County remained solidly Republican, with President-elect Trump receiving almost 73,000 votes, and Vice President Harris receiving more than 28,000 votes, which is, not unsurprising considering the geography of Hall County, it being in the relatively more conservative Northeast Georgia. But Hall County, its county seat is the city of Gainesville, and Gainesville is an important focus for our organization and for anyone who's trying to understand the landscape for Latinos in the state of Georgia. In 2024, the number of Latino registered voters in the city in Gainesville increased to 55, almost 5,500 Latino registered voters. That's up from 4,100 in 2020. Of these, more than 2,000 voters participated in the election, which resulted in a turnout rate of 40.68%. So while we're continuing to see voter registration increase across Hall County and in the city of Gainesville, it's important that we continue to invest, as GALEO, especially in actually turning out voters in the city, Latino voters in the city of Gainesville. One thing I do want to also mention is that 2024 marked an important and historic milestone for the city of Gainesville with the election of Abigail Guzman to the Gainesville City Council. She's the first Hispanic person to successfully claim a seat on the municipality's council. And we believe that Abigail's victory represents a significant achievement for the Latino community, by demonstrating our growing political influence and the importance of ongoing civic engagement. Her election, I will point out, does come amid our continued advocacy to eliminate the city's at-large voting process, which we feel has historically diminished the ability of Latino and African American communities to elect candidates of their choice. However, regardless of that, we believe that the election of Abigail Guzman is a great sign of the progress that has been made in the city of Gainesville, over the years. And I don't know if Jerry, do you want to add anything to that?
No, we're glad to have Abigail representing Latino community in the city of Gainesville. And certainly from a GALEO Impact Fund perspective, we were glad to have been able to endorse her.
Absolutely. Then, we have Cherokee County. Cherokee experienced some pretty significant growth in the Latino voter population. The number of registered Latino voters increased to just over 16,000, which is up from 12,000 in 2020. And so obviously Cherokee County is one of those counties that we'll need to continue looking at. And as you see, the turnout rate of Latinos in Cherokee County has essentially stayed the same between this cycle and last cycle. Oh, I am missing the graph for Whitfield County. When we publish that, I'll ensure that we have the correct graph. So you'll just have to listen to my voice to get this one. But in 2024, Whitfield County, Latino electorate in Whitfield County continued to grow and actually surpassed that of Clayton County, with the number of, which we'll talk about in a moment, with the number of registered Latino voters increasing to 15,187. That's up from 11,049 in 2020. However, Latino voter turnout did decrease slightly. You know, we we would we saw a turnout rate of 46.45% this cycle. Last cycle, we actually saw a turnout rate of 49.83%, almost half of the registered voters in Whitfield County, Latino voters, I should say. However, with the increase again that we saw in the actual number of registered Latino voters in Whitfield, more of them voted this cycle than last cycle. Latinos now represent about almost a quarter of Whitfield County's registered voters. This highlights the growing importance as a voting bloc in this rural county in Northwest Georgia. And I want to also talk about the city of Dalton. Whitfield County, which is Whitfield County's population center, if you will, because Dalton saw significant growth as well. There are almost 6,500 registered Latino voters as of 2024 in the city of Dalton. And in 2020, that was, excuse me, which is up from 2020. And then we saw a turnout rate, we saw more than 3,000 Latinos in the city of Dalton vote in 2024. That's a turnout rate of almost 47%, which is slightly above the county average. So indicating that there is slightly higher engagement in the city of Dalton than in the broader county, which is unsurprising given that so many Latinos in Whitfield County are concentrated in the city of Dalton. Dalton is another city that we would like to see move away from the at-large voting process, because we believe that we have concerns about its compliance with the Voting Rights Act. But despite these challenges, the expanding population of Latino registered voters in Dalton underscores the potential for increased civic participation and representation in the future. So that is Whitfield and the city of Dalton. Again, another county that we continue to do a lot of great work in. And as I mentioned, before we publish this presentation, we'll be sure to include the correct graph for Whitfield and the city of Dalton. And then we have coming in eighth place, Clayton County. We saw an increase of registered Latino voters rising to just over 15,000 registered Latino voters. That's up from less than 12,000 in 2020. And then in Forsyth County, we saw a significant growth as well. In 2024, the number of registered Latino voters in Forsyth rose to just over 12,000, which is up from just under 10,000 in 2020. Uh, Still, the actual turnout rate is relatively high in Forsyth County, at almost 65%, and which is pretty much in line with the turnout rates we've saw in 2020 and even 2016. So Forsyth, another one of our state's fast growing counties, is another county that we'll continue to keep an eye on and do work in. And then coming in 10th, rounding out the top 10 is Chatham County down in South Georgia. And Chatham continues to grow. With in 2024, the number of registered Latino voters increasing to almost 12,000, which is up from just under 10,000 in 2020. And we also actually saw a slight turnout rate and percentage improvement from 44.17% in 2020 to 45.72% in 2024. And, as you'll see in all of these counties, we saw growth in the number of registered Latino voters, and that's because of the work that GALEO is doing, as well as our partners across the state and as well as national partners. So, key takeaways for our counties is just that Hall County continues to lead in growth with a 35.6% increase in registered Latino voters in Hall from 2020. And then Cherokee County actually followed closely with a 34.9% growth rate. And, Forsyth continues to grow, but Gwinnett County maintains its role as the state's leader in sheer volume of Latino voters, adding almost 16,000 new Latino voters since 2020, which is a growth rate of just over 22%. And, again, city level data for Gainesville and Dalton continue to highlight the growing potential of localized Latino communities. While voter turnout in these cities remains lower than we would necessarily want it to be, we continue to see a steady increase in participation in the number of registered Latino voters. And of course, Gainesville's milestone of electing its first Hispanic city council person exemplifies the incremental progress in representation and political influence for Latinos in the state of Georgia. So now I'd like to move on to the congressional districts. There's a lot has changed with our congressional districts, and that is, not in no small part because of the redistricting process that we saw happen in the aftermath of the 2020 census. GALEO certainly, as our organization, we had issues with redistricting, partly because, what was once a minority majority congressional district, at that point was the 7th district, which comprised essentially the entirety of Gwinnett County, was split into the 9th, 10th, 13th, and 4th congressional districts, completely moving out of the 7th district. So GALEO, alongside a coalition of civil rights groups, we challenged, those maps in court. Ultimately, we didn't get the result that we wanted, because, but we move on. We continue to do our work, and we hope to one day obtain a congressional district map that doesn't dilute the power of our Latino voters and other minority voters, or minoritized voters in the state of Georgia. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jerry.
No, just in the last census, we saw communities of color leading the population growth in the state of Georgia. But unfortunately, the Georgia legislature did its efforts to dilute the power of communities of color all across the state of Georgia, unfortunately, in this redistricting process that we have. And you see the slicing and dicing that happen across the state, not just at the congressional level, but also in the legislative levels as well.
Absolutely. So, so a lot has changed with these district maps, to say the least. And so, if you're wondering which congressional district has the largest Latino electorate just by volume, that would be the ninth congressional district, which continues to be represented by Congressman Andrew Clyde. The ninth district, which historically has included, significant swaths of North Georgia and encompassed much of Hall County, it now includes a larger portion of North Gwinnett as well, which is part of the reason why the ninth congressional district has now has the largest number of Latino voters at 58,426 registered Latino voters, 50 just over 54% of whom cast their ballots in the 2024 election. The 13th district, represented by Congressman David Scott, has the second largest Latino electorate with just under 50,000 Latino voters. The 13th, for those of you who don't know, includes the entirety of Rockdale County, as well as portions of Gwinnett, Clayton, Newton, and Henry counties. Then the 11th district has the third largest Latino voter population. The 11th district, of course, being represented by Barry Loudermilk. There are just over 44,000 registered Latino voters in that district, which includes Pickens, Gordon, and Bartow counties, and also portions of Cherokee and Cobb counties. And it had a turnout rate of just under 58% of Latino voters in the 11th district during the 2024 election cycle. And then the 14th and 4th congressional districts have the fourth and fifth largest Latino electorates, respectively. And then the 7th congressional district is has the next largest, size of Latino electorate. However, it did take the cake for the highest turnout of Latino registered voters in its congressional district, with a turnout rate at 62%, which is, as you can see, by far the highest of any of the other congressional districts. And then for anyone who's curious, Sanford Bishop of the second congressional district had the smallest Latino electorate in Georgia, as well as the lowest turnout of Latino voters during the 2024 election cycle. So moving on to the state Senate. This ranking is sorted according to the number of Latino registered voters in each district. As we saw in the last election cycle or last presidential election cycle, District 5, represented by State Senator Sheikh Rahman, tops the list of Georgia Senate districts. District 5, as you can see on the table here, has just over 24,000 registered Latino voters, nearly 12,000 of whom turned out to vote in the 2024 election cycle. And then and of course, Sheikh Rahman's district is located in Gwinnett County, which is obviously a significant county when it comes to population of Latino voters. And then, perhaps unsurprisingly, the next Senate district to have before size of Latino electorate is a Hall County district, represented or soon to be represented by Drew Eccles. That district 49 State Senate District 49. There are just over 21,000 Latinos registered to vote, just over 10,000 of whom voted in the 2024 election cycle. And then I would also like to point out that the next largest district is the 54th district, represented by State Senator Chuck Payne in Whitfield County. And so, as you'll see, a great number of these districts are essentially, either in the Metro Atlanta area, particularly in Gwinnett County, or in Hall County, as well as we have Chuck Payne in Whitfield County. So these Senate districts, they're pretty much in line and come from those counties where we have significant populations of Latino voters. And the same is true for state house districts. For anyone, excuse me. the largest House district, or the House district with the most Latino registered voters, was the fourth district, represented by Casey Carpenter, who is also in Whitfield County, in the city of Dalton. And then after him, you'll see you have Matt Dubnik, who's in Hall County, and then Dewey McLean, Shelley Hutchinson, Marvin Lim, Sam Park, all of whom are in Gwinnett County. So again, you know, these the House districts that we're seeing and the state Senate districts that we're seeing are kind of unsurprising given the data that we saw for the counties that those House districts are in. One thing that we haven't necessarily included in our previous reports that I wanted to touch on and just mention, in our report for this cycle is that we have more Latinos and Hispanics who are actually serving in the state legislature than we had in years past. Obviously, Jason on the state Senate side, Jason Esteves and Jason Ani Vitarte, who is a part of the leadership in the state Senate. They've both have served for a number of years now in the state Senate. But there will be a new Latino state senator in Georgia, and his name is Rashawn Kemp, and he represents the 38th district. And then we saw some growth on the House side as well. Obviously, Representatives Olalier, Draper, Martinez, and Sines, they were all in the legislature already. But this cycle, we saw two new Latinos elected to the state house with Gabriel Sanchez in the 42nd district in Cobb County. And then we have Marian Santos in the McDonough area who was elected to the state house as well. And so, this is significant growth in the Latino Hispanic caucus for Georgia, especially, I'm sure for Jerry, who's been around for more than 20 years here and was there, when the first Latinos were elected to the state legislature. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jerry.
Yeah, I just would like to say, I mean, this is a historic number of Latinos representing the Latino community and their constituents in the Georgia legislature. So it is a historic moment for Georgia to see this many Hispanic elected officials in the Georgia legislature. But I also like to say we did lose a long-serving Latino Representative Pedro Marin in this last election cycle decided not to run for re-election. So he served a long time and served our community well, but his part of the legacy is that there are many more also Latino elected officials that are now representing our communities. The other thing I'd like to point out is that all of these elected officials in the legislature do not represent Latino majority districts. So that means that they were elected in a multiracial coalition of voters that came together and voted for electing these representatives in their posts. So it is a historic day for Georgia. I just wanted to add that it is a historic amount of legislators that we will have in the Georgia legislature that are of Latino descent.
And with that, I think the key takeaways from 2024 that we have for our Latino community is, one, we saw a growth rate of about 30% in the number of Latino registered voters since 2020 in the state of Georgia. Latino women continue to lead the way in civic participation. And of course, young Latinos we continue to target young Latinos in registering to vote and actually turning out to vote. They're an important demographic, to say the least. And then, according to exit polling data that we've seen from Unidos, 64% of Georgia Latinos voted for Vice President Harris, with 35% supporting President-elect Donald Trump. that support for Vice President Harris among Latino voters in Georgia is actually, if we trust, if we can rely on the exit polling data, is actually 2 points higher than the national average. So Vice President Harris actually did better with Latinos in Georgia than she did nationally in the 2024 election cycle. Uh, Latinos remain a critical demographic for any candidate running statewide in Georgia. That if you take away nothing else, it needs to be that is that, while obviously a lot of narratives have been pushed about the Latino vote in the out since in the aftermath of this election cycle. There's some nuance there, and there's still, if Latinos are still up for grabs in many ways. But if it would take a significant shift in the tides to see a Republican statewide win Latinos statewide in the state of Georgia. But all that being said, a 30% growth rate is not small. That's significant. And that is thanks to the work that organizations like GALEO and our coalition of civic engagement partners continue to do to register Latino voters and turn them out to vote. Our community is strong and is expanding and growing in our influence and our representation in the state of Georgia. And before I finish this presentation, I just wanted to give thanks to Dr. Trey Hood with the University of Georgia, Dorian Kyle with the NALEO Educational Fund, who they both helped sift through the data and organize it for us so that we could put out this report for public ingestion. And of course, I want to thank our teams at GALEO and the GALEO Impact Fund for helping put this all together. We will, be publishing our report on our website in the near future, so you can sift through all of that data and information. So I don't know if I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this presentation.
Do we have any questions from anybody with the media? As Kyle mentioned, we will be sending out a press release about the report and links to the full report, so you all can dive deeper into the numbers, as well as publishing our slide deck on our websites, and the recording of this press conference as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our media team, our communications team, headed up by Lorena, or reach out to Kyle or myself, and we'll make sure that we get information to you. Thank you so much.
Hola Jerry, Jorge Buzo de Univisión también está acompañando a nuestra colega también que se acaba de incorporar al equipo, Yolice Páez. Mi pregunta sería en lo siguiente. Las expectativas, obviamente se tenía una expectativa inicial para buscar el voto latino hace un año y por eso se trabajó fuertemente para tratar de incentivar. ¿Se cumplió la expectativa o no? ¿Cuál sería la respuesta en este caso? Gracias.
Gracias, Jorge. Sí, claro, el voto latino continúa a crecer bastante y participó en las últimas elecciones que vimos aquí en el estado de Georgia, y continúa a participar en las elecciones con bastante participación de nuestra comunidad. Sí, tuvimos bastante éxito de participación de la comunidad latina. Debemos de tener bastante orgullo sobre eso, sobre la comunidad, y vamos a continuar adelante a promover el voto latino porque se debe de ser respetado también.
Bueno, también tiene
Muchísimas
otra
gracias.
pregunta. Sí, a ver, adelante. Adelante, Yoli.
Adelante, Jorge, adelante.
No, adelante, tú adelante. No, sí, Yoli, sí que de hecho también para que se presente como parte del equipo de Univisión Atlanta. Adelante, Yoli, tienes una pregunta.
Vale, voy a procurar colocarme a la orden. Hay un tema con mi cámara, creo que ahora sí, pues logro establecer contacto y quería darle las gracias por permitirme incluirme dentro de, digamos, de la parte de media que pudo recibir toda esta información. Y tal como comenta Jorge, estoy incorporándome al equipo de Univisión. Afortunadamente, pues el equipo venía trabajando muy de cerca con Galeo. Sin embargo, como complemento a la pregunta que Jorge hacía, yo quisiera que pudiéramos en español darle una referencia a los televidentes de cuáles serían los planes. Entendemos que las presidenciales pues ya pasaron, pero seguramente Galeo tiene cosas nuevas para nuestra comunidad que pueden compartirnos.
Sí, pues vamos a continuar a hacer los esfuerzos en nuestra comunidad de desarrollar el voto latino para que continúe a ser bastante poderoso. Este año tenemos elecciones locales que nos vamos a enfocar en esas elecciones porque son importantes también para nuestra comunidad, pero también vamos a abogar por nuestra comunidad en el Capitolio. Vamos a tener un día de latinos en el Capitolio el 5 de febrero. Invitamos a toda la comunidad y también vamos a continuar a hacer los esfuerzos de desarrollar nuestro poder con nuestros líderes en la comunidad y tenemos aplicaciones para nuestro programa que tenemos de liderazgo abierto al momento para nuestra comunidad. Hay bastante trabajo que hacer, hay bastante trabajo que hacer también de informar y educar a nuestra comunidad sobre sus derechos como inmigrantes, porque en la administración que viene vamos a tener bastante que hacer para asegurar que los derechos de los inmigrantes sean respetados también por la ley. Y en eso nos vamos a enfocar en este año. ¿Algo más, Kyle?
Bueno, y también vamos a trabajar por las elecciones en 2026, que van a tener un impacto profundísimo, profundo, ah, no solo en el estado, pero en todo el país.
Muchísimas gracias.
Another question from media? Thank you all for participating. We look forward to hearing from you, and you should be receiving our press release coming out real soon. Thank you so much.